Hi, I'm Diane Hales, and I'm the author of Mona Lisa, Life Discovered. I'd like to tell you 5 things you may not have known about the world's most famous painting. The first thing is that Mona Lisa Gherardini was a real woman. We have her baptismal record, we have her death certificate. Mona Lisa Gherardini lived her entire life in Florence, and these were the most tumultuous decades in the history of the town. She was born in 1479, and she died in 1542. But what's interesting is that Florence's most famous daughter is invisible. There are no plaques, there are no monuments. You have to go looking for Lisa Gherardini in order to find her in her hometown. Lisa Gherardini came from an ancient and noble clan. The Gherardini date back to ancient Rome, and they lived in Florence from around, the 10th century. Now, her family were knights, and they were also feudal lords, but these were not sort of the knights of the dashing, heroic knights of Camelot. They were pretty much robber barons, and they made much of their fortune by forcing any merchants who were bringing merchandise to Florence to pay them quite a ransom to pass by their properties. And if the merchants refused, they would simply cut the tendons on the donkey's legs and then confiscate the goods for themselves. But the Gherardini were known for their pride and their fierce independence. They prided themselves on their Gherardininess. And this was something that, even though they lost their fortune, they lost their power, they never lost their pride. And I think that this is one of the things that Mona Lisa felt and that she inherited in her blood, this pride in being a Gherardini. Now, Mona Lisa was a wife. This may not sound remarkable, but there weren't many choices for women back in Renaissance Florence, and basically you either became a wife or you became a nun. Now, the problem was that in order to obtain a husband, you needed a dowry. And Mona Lisa's family had pretty much lost the family fortune by the time she came of age. And so she had to have perhaps another asset, and that may well have been her beauty. Mona Lisa was a woman of Renaissance Florence. Well, what did that mean? Well, from our perspective, we'd have to say they were an unliberated group of women. They had no legal rights. They could not own property. They could not work. They could not even enter public buildings. They couldn't travel unescorted. And yet, even though feminists at first said that probably the most unfortunate place for a woman of that time to be born was in Renaissance Florence, they were the ones who inspired some of the greatest works of art. And you can see in the paintings the nobility of their spirit, the strength in their spirit. So I do not think that Mona Lisa may not have been liberated by our definition, but this was a strong, confident, competent woman. Now, Mona Lisa was a mother. At the time, childbearing was highly perilous. 1 in 4 young Florentine women died in childbirth. Mona Lisa gave birth to 3 sons and 3 daughters. She also had a stepson that she acquired from her husband's first marriage. Mona Lisa gave birth to 6 children. 2 of them died in childhood, one at just the age of 1 month and a little girl at the age of 2 years. Now, Mona Lisa's 2 surviving daughters were not offered up as potential brides to husbands. Instead, Mona Lisa and her husband Francesco del Giocondo placed the girls in convents. We don't know exactly why, but we have to think that it was probably a combination of things. I visited the convent where one of Mona Lisa's daughters lived, and it was a place of great tranquility even today. I think part of it was that in perilous times, that Mona Lisa may have felt that her daughters would have been safer there, but it also could have been an expression of her own faith. Many Renaissance women, particularly as they advanced in age, expressed great devotion to God, great piety, and it wasn't unusual for women to do what Lisa ultimately did. There's a certain irony that Mona Lisa, who's inspired devotion in millions of men, chose to live out eternity in the company of women. It was her choice, probably the only choice she ever could make about where she lived, where she was located in the world, that she chose to be buried in a convent in the heart of Florence. Of all of his works, Leonardo seemed to have a special attachment to the Mona Lisa. He kept it with him all of his life. even after he left Italy to live in the Loire Valley under the patronage of King Francis I, the painting that traveled with him and that he kept at his side until his very last breath was the Mona Lisa. We know that Lisa's life intersected with that of Leonardo sometime around 1503. She was 24 at the time. She had just given birth to her second son. Leonardo was 51, and he was a venerated artist, but he had been forced to flee from Florence, from Milano, where he had been happily working for many years. Leonardo may have begun this painting for the sake of getting the money. He needed the money. He had just moved to Florence. He had lost his patronage. But I think there was something more to it. I think that there was something in Lisa, perhaps her Gherardini-ness, that attracted and inspired him.